Hi everyone. I thought that given that I have developed this new typology of INFJs according to 4 subtypes, namely secure / spiritual, adaptive submissive / compliant, solipsist, and spiritualized, why not have a look at how these might overlap or intersect with Enneagram types? Because I know a lot of you guys are also interested in Enneagram, and so am I. I've made videos on the intersections between like INFJ-ness and Enneagram types. But now that our understanding of the different families of INFJs is much more rich, much more high definition, more nuanced, I think we can reach a kind of more detailed and sort of high fidelity understanding of those intersections. And as you'll see, there are interesting ramifications to this, which you may or may not agree with, which is why your feedback in the comment section will certainly be very useful to others watching the channel and to me too, by the way, in my ongoing reflections on this topic, because these reflections are ongoing. I'm only starting now to try to derive the Enneagram implications of this new fourfold classification, because that's what it is. So first of all, let's just leave aside the Enneagram types that INFJs are almost never within. Right? They don't really fit those Enneagram types. So you'll rarely ever, probably never encounter an INFJ 7, an INFJ 8, or an INFJ 3. Now, understanding why is tricky. It's relatively easy in the case of the 7, because a 7 by essence is a type that will have very well-developed extroverted perception. You want to observe, you want to explore, and that's kind of just not compatible with the INFJ's inferior SE. Also, perfect explanation of why the INTJ is never a 7 either. In terms of the 8, I think that when you're an introverted feeler, right? So not an FI user, but an introvert who's also a feeler, it's almost impossible to fit with type 8, and we'll leave it at that because I think that's sufficiently intuitive. In the case of type 3, I think the explanation is a little bit more complex. It's true that a lot of type 3 are extroverts, INFJ is not, but you do encounter type 3 introverts, like there are type 3 introverts in show business, music, in the music world, among actors. So I think it's the combination of being an introvert and also the very strong significance of the NI world for INFJs is that their achievements, to the extent that they care about their achievements, are usually going to be about how well their NI world is translated into external reality in a way that feels authentic to them. That's linked to NI perfectionism that I discussed in a recent video, so you can check back that video if you want to hear more about the NI kind of perfectionism, reproducing the holism of their mindscape, into external reality once severance is resolved. And type 3 is in the world. It's not very concerned with the mindscape in a sense. It's kind of it's kind of functioning according to the rules of external reality, social reality, and so forth. Whereas for an INFJ, the rules of external reality are always mediated by the rules of the NI world. And that's how we can leave aside type 3. That leaves us with 6 other types that INFJs may or may not be. And let's have a look. So I'd say that if we start with the secure INFJ, the INFJ who has benefited, at least in theory, from good enough parenting, good enough attachment style, is not going to follow the dialectic path of adaptive submission / compliance, solipsism, and possible transcendence and spiritualization later on. So they have a different kind of pathway toward maturity, and they tend to be comfortable. They tend to trust external reality. They tend to feel secure with people as an extension of their primary link of security with the early caregivers. Now, these INFJs are probably they might just be any type, except 6. I think 6 is just a type that, for better or worse, in the Enneagram world, is defined by a lack of something. And that could be a conceptual issue with Enneagram. But the fact of the matter is that the 6 is defined in this way. It's almost impossible to think securely attached to type 6. That's just very hard to conceive of. So secure INFJ and type 6, I don't think so. But you could very well be type 1 or type 2 or type 4. It's not impossible to think of a secure 4 or a secure 5 or a secure 9. I think that, again, this is going to depend on factors that are, outside of the kind of subtype of INFJ you are in this instance. The secure INFJ could be any of these types. Other elements of their family history and perhaps some genetic predispositions might lead them one or another path. Again, except the 3 we mentioned at the very start as being just not INFJ compatible for the most part, and not 6. By contrast, type 6 is going to be very prevalent among compliant INFJs, adaptive submissive INFJs. That's the same thing. And in fact, it's true that we tend to think of type 6 in general, in Enneagram terms, even among those who don't really care about like Myers-Briggs or Jungian types or whatever, they just care about Enneagram. 6 tends to be considered compliant, or by opposition, according to some theories, the opposite of compliant, right? Like rebellious and what's the word that they sometimes use, like counterphobic. So it's interesting because I think that I don't think that counterphobic in the sense that people typically understand this term, I don't think that it's going to be aligned with solipsism. But in the sense in which I understand it, this would be aligned with solipsism. But just to stick for now to the compliant INFJ, well, that's the INFJ that essentially security seeking and tries to their best to repress their unique individuality in the name of that survival in the midst of others by acting, interjecting, the norms, values, modes of organization of the group, make those their own for security purposes. That's very type 6-ish. So I think that we can safely say it's going to be very common among adaptive submissive INFJs. You could probably encounter some other, Enneagrams for adaptive submissive INFJs, but type 6 is going to be the most common for sure. It might be the most common as well for the solipsist, although, because again, counterphobic, forget about the counterphobic that you see in like fiction or whatever, like even more aggressive than type 8 kind of counterphobic 6. No, just the flip side of the compliant, basically, is very deeply concerned with externality as something dangerous, but instead of taking up a stance of submission, takes a stance of rebellion. That's still type 6, and that's a form through an introverted medium, through an NI world embraced as a womb type medium. That's kind of the solipsist. But of course, you can also have solipsists that, first of all, they don't necessarily go through compliance, adaptive submission, they go straight to solipsism. And there's no reason why those could not also be type 4, type 5, potentially type 9, and potentially type 1. But I think 4, 5, and 6 are going to be the most common for solipsists. Really curious to see what your comments are. Now, the spiritualized INFJ is a conundrum in the sense, and that's also a way of questioning the whole Enneagram framework. It's like, well, if the spiritualized INFJ has been through previous stages, including either compliance or solipsism or both, then what type can they be? Well, they can be the types that are represented within those subtypes. That means that this spiritualized INFJ, who's transcendent in many ways and who is able to accomplish great things potentially, could be a type 6, which is not something that often is thought about when the type, Enneagram 6 is at the center of discussion. Again, we're usually defining type 6s in terms of a lack, but you can't really say that the spiritualized INFJ is defined by a sense of lack. You see, the difference between my model and the Enneagram model is that the type 6, well, the type 6 just illustrates this, is that my model is obviously more dynamic. It suggests the possibility of a real journey of individuation, a path forward where you become, in a sense, not different from what you were before, in a way that might even, it doesn't transcend your INFJ-ness, but it could transcend your Enneagram type. So it's a real open question whether it would be better to say, no, you're still type 6, but you're a mature type 6 that has these traits, and so our sort of mainstream understanding of type 6 has to be updated. Or we say, no, in fact, in view of our findings, relating to the different families of INFJs and their particular journeys of individuation, self-affirmation, maturing, and so on, what appears to be the case is that the Enneagram needs to be reinterpreted such that it may be possible to change Enneagram type over time. I know that's counterintuitive to a lot of people, particularly people who've been so used to thinking about Enneagram in more static terms. Of course, there are still like axes of growth and disintegration. I'm aware of that. I just don't think it's quite sufficient to account for the phenomenon of a spiritualized 6. And yet, that's the reality. I think that's what is most closely borne out by the facts. So how do we manage this? I think either you want to update your understanding of the type 6. That's what I have tended to defend this. But I think, and you can refer back to my videos on INFJ 6s from the past, because that's where I started sketching the possibility of this dynamic evolution, but still within, a type 6 kind of assignation, or rather assignment. But the possibility is real that a more dynamic understanding of Enneagram itself might be required as an upshot of our particular theorizing on INFJs. Really curious to know about, your thoughts here too. Of course, a spiritualized INFJ could also be a 4, a 5, or a 6, potentially a 1, if they didn't go through compliance stages. Let me know in the comments, again, what you think. Don't forget, I've written 2 books on INFJs. You might be curious to hear more about. First of all, INFJ Life in the Modern World. That's my most recent book. The Infinite Soul is the full title. How to find happiness, value, purpose, and an authentic INFJ life that is fruitful in a world that is often seen as hostile. That is the book to get, guys. The link is right below. It goes deep. Check the reviews. Leave a review if you would be so kind, if you love the book. The Ecstatic Soul is my prequel. A new look at the INFJ personality that came out a few years ago. Lots of reviews. You can also check whether that be something you might like to get for Christmas or for the New Year or for someone else or for yourself. It's the deepest investigation of the INFJ consciousness, INFJ mind, and what it's like to be an INFJ. Get it if you haven't yet. And as usual, the lifeblood of my channel is my Patreon page. Please consider supporting me at the link below. It helps me keep going, neither more nor less. And in addition to that, you get some bonus content from me, in-depth videos every 2 weeks, interact with the community or with me, and suggest, topics for me to cover. So it can be win-win. Consider it. I'll see you next time, guys. Bye-bye.